Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of our demonstration to create a program that utilizes a Qt designer layout or UI file. So in the first part we created this user interface file titled sum_demo.ui. We created that using the Qt Designer program. If you want to go back and see the process that we went through to create this dialog with the text boxes, or excuse me, the line edits and the sunken label, then go see the video that's titled Part 1. So now that we've got this UI file created, and always check your object inspector over here on the right to make sure everything has the correct name. You may even want to close that and then open it back just to be sure that everything retains its name. Qt Designer is real particular when you change something in this object inspector window to rename it. Make sure that after you do that you hit enter. If you don't hit the enter key, even though it shows your change here in the window, that change may not take effect. So now that we've got this created, let's create a Python program to work with this. So I'm gonna go back to Blackboard, and here we are in module 2 of our class, and I'm scrolling down because we need the second part of the files that I gave you to kind of make this whole process easier. And what we're looking for is right here, a reusable template for GUIs with the Qt toolkit. So I'm going to click into that folder, and you'll notice that there are two files. The one we started with in part 1 of this demonstration was the GUI template.ui file. That's what we renamed and saved it with a different name and added the various widgets to it. So that's now been renamed to sum_demo.ui. So we're going to download the GUI template here. Just right click and save link as if you're in Firefox, and you can save it to the folder that you want this to be in. I'm going to put it in a folder for our class that I have already created here in the right year, 2020 spring, and then module 2, and then some demo. I'm going to save it as GUI template. So save that down, and now I've got that. This is the template that we're going to open up in Tawny in order to create the rest of our program. We've created the user interface. Now we're going to create the Python code to process that UI file. So going to switch over to Tawny, and here's Tawny, and I'm going to open that. And I'm on Linux, so you'll notice that I've got to browse to my flash drive and get into the correct folder. And once I'm in there, wherever I've saved it, there's the GUI template. I'll open that up. Now obviously you'll want to change these comments up there, or you'll lose points on the projects that you have to do in the class. Now some of the changes from what is shown to you in the textbook, this is one change right here. We added this import to get the load UI file. Now this is a special library that I found. Your textbook doesn't know about this, So this saves a lot of work. If we weren't using this, we would have to run every UI file that we created through the PyQt5 program to create Python code, and we would have to do that every time we modified the UI file. So we don't want that. So I'm going to import this line, and then I'm going to change this line in our template, because right now it's loading the GUI template.ui. Remember, the one we just created is or modified and saved is called the sum_demo.ui. So right here I'm going to change that to be sum_demo, and I'm also going to resave my GUI template as a different name. We're going to make it match the UI file that we created. So sum_demo.ui was the GUI. Make sure you save this as sum_demo.py for the Python file. And so now that I've got that saved, you can see I have sum_demo.py. I like to match those up with the UI files so that I know which UI file goes with which program. This makes a lot of sense. So if you come in here and look now, you can see in the folder I have the UI file that we created in part 1, and I have the Python file that we just created after modifying that one line in the GUI template.py file, and we resaved it as sum_demo.py. So once we've done that, you can run this, and I would encourage you to run it just so that you know you've got everything right. So I'm going to go ahead and run this now, and we'll see our dialog pops up. Now, the only processing that's hooked up right now to this dialog UI that we created is the exit button. And I'll point that out to you here in a moment. But if we click exit right now, it will run the exit method for our class here. So I'm going to click exit, and you can see that we exited. Now, looking at this Python code, I was not lying to you in Module 1 when I said everything we did for the rest of the class was going to be an object. So if you look here, we have a class definition. The class definition is for the myForm class. You'll notice it inherits a QDialog. That's part of the PyQt5 toolkit. So we're inheriting the QDialog class. Notice also right there, that should be familiar to you from the first module of the class on objects. We're doing a call to the super to run the constructor of the dialog class that we just inherited. So all that gets done, and then we have a push button here that this code was already written for you. I wrote it in the GUI template file that I provided to you. So what's this doing? Well, self.ui gets populated with all the widgets when this line is run. So this line pulls all the widgets in from your UI file into this namespace self.ui. So if we want to access one of the widgets on our UI file, then this is the name of the push button exit that we have on our UI file. I can switch over there and show it to you, but this matches up with the widget on our UI file. So I'm going to pop over there so you can see it. Right here is the exit button. You see what it's called? Push button exit. So just pointing that out to you. So we have to connect the signal, and the signal that we're going to connect is the clicked signal. So anytime somebody clicks that button, the clicked signal is emitted, and we're going to connect that signal to a slot that we have to write. This is just a method of our object or our class. You notice that it's self.exit method. So we're connecting the push button exit to the self.exit method. So I wrote that for you. Right here it is. This should also be familiar to you from the first module of the class, where we were creating methods of a class definition. Here's the whole class definition for my form. And you can see everything that's indented under class is part of that class definition. Okay? So what happens is when this signal, this clicked signal, is emitted by push button exit, meaning somebody clicked the button, it goes and runs this exit method. So what's the exit method do? It does one thing. It calls the QApplication instance.quit, and that exits our GUI program that's running. So that's a little bit about how it works. Now, I want to point out down here, here's where we actually create an instance of the class that we defined up here, the myForm class that we defined. Okay, so that gets instantiated. An object named W gets created from our myForm class definition. So this line brings a W object into existence. So after this runs, our UI is active and on the screen. Okay. Now this line right here, this app.exec, this call right here causes the application event loop to start running, and all GUI applications run in a loop. And so what they do is they are continuously looping, looking to see if somebody's clicked something or somebody's typed something into one of the widgets. So as long as that loop is running, our program is running. When this app.exe ends, then we will capture whatever the end code is with this sys.exit. So this cleanly exits our program. Okay? So now that I've explained how all that works and we've already run it, let's go add some code to this. Now remember, here's our UI file right here. We have 2 line edits on there to capture stuff that folks type in. Okay, I'm clicking them right here so you can see them. Line edit num1, line edit num2. We also have a push button. That push button is called push button calc. So let's connect this push button up. Let's hook this push button up to some Python code. So back to Tawny. Okay, so right here in this open space, we can just open that up a little bit more. Self.ui.pushButtonCalc. Remember, that came from right here, push button calc. Okay, so we're going to switch back to Tawny now. Push button calc. We want to connect the clicked signal. We're going to connect it to a method that doesn't exist yet. We're going to write that method, self.calc method. How's that? Okay, So now that we've got that done, we need to write a method right here, and it needs to be indented underneath our class definition right here. So in this empty space right here, that's as good a spot as any. Def calc method. Remember, every method of a class has to receive an instance of self. Okay. At this point, we have created a calc method. It just doesn't have any code in it. And you can't really run this right now because it would throw an error. It would actually raise an error. If you wanted to do it, though, we could do this. Put a pass in there. Because something, Python will tell you, something has to be indented underneath that method. Okay? Pass does nothing in Python except it just satisfies the Python program so that it would run. So we can check what we've done right now. If we run this, I've actually connected this up, but the only thing that's going to happen is when we click that button, it's going to run pass. And so you really won't see anything happen. Okay? You see, I'm clicking it, and we're not really seeing anything happen. So I can click exit, and now we can go on and write some stuff. Okay, so at this point, we want to capture what's in each of those line edits. And if you recall, those line edits were named line edit num1 and line edit num2. So inside our calc method, we can create ourselves an integer variable if that's what we want to use. Let somebody key an int in. Remember this method, the int method will convert whatever's inside these parentheses into an integer. Now, a line edit always returns text to us, so that's why I've got to put whatever I want to be an integer inside of those parentheses. So remember, our namespace is what? Self.ui. That got populated from this line. Okay, so self.ui.line edit num1. Now remember, the Python language is case sensitive, so we need to make sure that line is a little l, e is a capital E, and the n is a capital N. So I'm going to pop over here and just make sure little l, capital E, capital N. Okay, so all that looks good. Okay, so self.ui.lineEdit num1, to get to what's in that, we'll call the text method. Notice I have to put parentheses on the end of it because that is actually a method call of that widget. Okay, so now what's happening is this is going to retrieve whatever somebody's typed into that line edit. Then this outer int is going to convert it into an integer, and then the equals says assign the result of this to this variable num1. So now we can do basically copy this line to save some typing, paste it in, make sure you get your indents right. Okay, and we'll capture num2. You notice I'm only changing a couple things there. Okay, now remember that our label that we want to populate with the result is right here that says sum of the two numbers, and it's named label sum. So help me remember label sum. Okay, so let's first calculate the sum. Sum equals num1 plus num2. Okay, and then we need to set the line, it's not the line edit, the label named label sum. We need to set its text to be a string. Remember, these things return a string. This has a property that we need to set to a string. So Let's go back to Tawny and finish this up. So at this point we've calculated sum. Sum is an integer that's got the sum or the result of adding 1 plus num1 plus num2. Alright, so remember our namespace for our UI is self.ui. The label that we're wanting to work with is what again? A label and then a capital SUM. Okay, so label, capital SUM. Okay, we want to set the text on that. Set text. Notice the T is capitalized. Okay, remember I told you that this set text property expects a string, so we can't just send it sum, it would blow. So we need to do a string function right here, and we're going to convert whatever sum contains into a string. So I'm going to put sum inside these parentheses. So at this point I think we've got a working program. So let's try it. Okay, first number, let's type a 10 in there. And then for the second number, I'll type a 20. And when I calculate it, you can see it populated the result. 10 plus 20 is 30. So our exit button's already hooked up. So you can see that a lot of the work was already done for you. To summarize, what did we need to change after we start out with the GUI template.py? We changed the comments up here at the top so that they're making sense. The name of this is Sum Demo. Okay, and this purpose is gonna provide an example, or let's just say demonstrate, capturing two numbers in line edits and showing the sum in a label on a dialog UI file. Okay, so we can change the date today, the day that I'm working on this, August 30th, 2020. Remember, we changed this like right here to match up with whatever UI file we're using. Okay, this code right here was already done for us. We added this code right here to connect the push button calc to a calc method that we wrote. We wrote this method right here, and that's all the code that we wrote. So think about it for a second. We modified this line, we added this line, and we wrote this method, and we're done. So that's pretty cool that it can be that short and that little work. So this is the end of part 2. I hope it makes sense, and you can feel free to play it back as many times as you want.